Sometime around the year 370, a teenager climbed a fence to steal pears. He did not want. There was a pear tree near his family's vineyard, heavy with fruit, and the fruit was nothing special. He wasn't hungry. He had better pears at home. But one night, he and a group of friends shook the tree, carried off great loads of it, and fed almost all of it to the pigs. They ate a few bites. The point was never the pears. Years later, that teenager became one of the most influential thinkers in Western history, and he could not stop turning this small, stupid theft over in his mind. He devoted a long passage of his great book to it. Of all the sins of his life, this was the one that disturbed him most. Not because it was the worst, but because it made the least sense. He had stolen nothing he desired. He had gained nothing he wanted. And he could find only one motive for the whole thing. He did it because it was not allowed. The man was Augustine, and the pears have been bothering people for 1600 years. Because if you are honest, you recognize the feeling. There is something in us that doesn't just tolerate the forbidden. It's drawn to it. The line in the wet paint that says, "Do not touch." The door marked private. The thing you were told very clearly never to do. And some quiet part of you leans toward it. For no reason you can defend. Here's the unsettling thing about Augustine and his pears. He wasn't tempted by the fruit. He was tempted by the fence. The prohibition itself was the attraction. He wrote that his only pleasure in the theft was the theft, that he loved his own undoing, loved the fault and not the thing he gained by the fault. Sit with that. Sometimes the thing we want isn't the object on the other side of the rule. It's the crossing of the rule itself. The wanting attaches to the line, not to what's behind it. So what is this? Why would a barrier make a thing more desirable rather than less? It runs against everything that should be true about us. We're supposed to be creatures who avoid danger and seek reward. A wall should read as a warning. Instead, for some part of the mind, a wall reads as an invitation. The simplest version of the answer was demonstrated of all places on children and toys. In 1966, a psychologist named Jack Brehm proposed an idea he called reactance. The claim is almost obvious once you hear it, and yet most of us never apply it to ourselves. Brehm argued that we don't just have preferences. We have a sense of our own freedom and we guard it fiercely. When someone tells us we cannot have something or cannot do something, they haven't only blocked an option. They've made a move against our autonomy. And we push back. The forbidden thing suddenly glows brighter, not because it got better, but because wanting it is now a way of taking our freedom back. You can watch it happen in a child. Tell a child that one particular toy is off limits, and that toy becomes the most interesting object in the room. It hasn't changed. The rule changed, and the rule did something the toy never could. It turned an ordinary thing into a test of whether this small person gets to decide for themselves. This is why the most effective way to make someone want something is to tell them they can't have it. Every parent learns it. Every advertiser knows it. The velvet rope, the members only door, the sold out show, the thing your friends are doing that you've been warned away from. None of it works by making the thing better. It works by restricting it. Because restriction speaks directly to the part of us that refuses to be managed. We don't crave the object, we crave the freedom the object now represents. But reactance only explains the part of us that's reaching for control. It doesn't explain the darker pull. It doesn't explain why the forbidden carries a charge that ordinary freedom never does. Why crossing the line feels not just satisfying but electric. For that, we have to go somewhere stranger. In 1913, Freud noticed something about the way taboos are built. A taboo, he pointed out, is never placed on something nobody wants to do. We don't make solemn laws against eating gravel or touching fire. We make them against the things people are powerfully, secretly drawn to. The basis of taboo, he wrote, is a forbidden action for which there exists a strong inclination in the unconscious. Read that again. The prohibition is not evidence that we don't want the thing. The prohibition is evidence that we do. And this means every taboo carries a hidden confession. The wall is the same height as the desire it's holding back. So when you stand in front of something forbidden and feel that strange flicker of attraction, you are not malfunctioning. You're feeling the desire the rule was built to contain. The rule and the wanting are two sides of one object. Freud called this ambivalence. The same thing at the same time, both sacred and tempting, both untouchable and magnetic. We are pulled in two directions by a single rope. Think about what this implies. A society reveals exactly what it most desires by looking at what it most forbids. The strength of a prohibition is a measure of the strength of the temptation underneath it. Nobody bothers to forbid the things we are indifferent to. So, the map of our taboos is also secretly a map of our hungers. What a culture builds its highest walls around tells you precisely where it feels the strongest pull. The forbidden and the desired are drawn on the same coordinates. Which brings us to the deepest layer, and the one that finally explains the electricity. Because reactance tells us we want our freedom back, and Freud tells us that desire was there all along. But neither quite captures why the act of crossing feels the way it does. For that, there is a French philosopher named Georges Bataille who spent his life thinking about exactly this charge. Bataille's claim is radical. He argued that the taboo and its violation are not enemies. They need each other. A transgression, he wrote, suspends the taboo without abolishing it. It doesn't deny the rule. It depends on the rule. And here is the line that holds the whole mystery. The taboo, Bataille said, is there to be violated. What he meant is that the thrill of the forbidden is not the thrill of escaping the rule. It's the thrill of feeling the rule precisely as you cross it. If there were no line, there would be no charge in stepping over it. The wrongness is the entire experience. Augustine pulling pears he didn't want was feeling the boundary of right and wrong made suddenly vividly real under his feet. That's why the theft felt like something and the pears felt like nothing. The pears were just fruit. The line was alive. So put the three together and the pull comes into focus. We reach for the forbidden partly to reclaim our freedom, partly because the prohibition was always built on top of a real desire, and partly because the very edge of a rule is where we feel most awake, most undeniably ourselves. The forbidden is where the structure of the world becomes visible, and there's a terrible aliveness in pressing against it. Now, here is the turn. All of this can read like a sentence of doom, as if we are just animals straining against every fence. But it isn't doom, it's information. The pull toward the forbidden is one of the most honest signals you have about yourself, if you are willing to read it instead of just obey it. When something forbidden pulls at you, you can ask a better question than yes or no. You can ask what the pull is actually made of. Is this reactance? Some part of me refusing to be controlled? In which case, the real issue isn't the thing at all. It's that I feel unfree. Is this a buried desire? The rule was quietly built to manage, in which case the desire deserves to be looked at honestly rather than just suppressed or just indulged. Or is this Bataille's pure edge, the wish to feel alive by violating something, in which case I should ask why the only place I feel awake is on the wrong side of a line. The forbidden is a mirror. What you're drawn to transgress tells you where you feel caged, what you secretly want, and where you've gone numb enough that only breaking something makes you feel real. None of those are reasons to cross the line. They're reasons to understand yourself. The pull isn't a command, it's a piece of evidence. And the people who run their whole lives either obeying every rule without question or breaking every rule for the thrill have one thing in common. Neither of them ever stopped to read what the pull was trying to tell them. Augustine never fully forgave himself for the pears. But he did something more useful than forgiveness. He refused to dismiss a meaningless teenage theft as nothing. And in staring at it, he found a whole architecture of the human heart, the strange machinery that makes us lean toward the very thing we are told to avoid. That's the move available to all of us. Not to worship the forbidden and not to pretend we feel nothing in front of it, but to treat the pull as a question worth answering. The line in the wet paint, the door marked private, the rule that suddenly feels alive under your feet. You don't have to cross it, but it's worth knowing why. For a moment, you want it to. Because what you find on the other side of that question is almost always more valuable than whatever was on the other side of the line.